You can start.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما اللهم أرنا الحق حقا الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وإرنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه ربنا ظلمنا أنفسنا وإن لم تغفر لنا وترحمنا لكونن من الخاسرين حسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل نعم المولى ونعم النصير غفرانك ربنا وإليك المصير اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه وأتباعه أجمعين والحمد لله رب العالمين آمين. Assalamu alaikum everyone. Welcome to our Saturday's discussion circles, and this week we are continuing, I believe, our third session on the 12th word. And the 12th word, for those of you who might be joining us for the first time today or have been here, just as a reminder, is a explanation and exposition, a discussion of the verse of Surah Baqarah, chapter 2, verse 269. In the name of God, the merciful, the compassionate, and he who has been given wisdom has been given great good. So the topic of discussion in this verse has also been, obviously, what is wisdom? And I'll just sort of summarize a few points from previous discussions. You might want to add something that may have been missed, but just a series of points to discuss. Essentially, the 12th word is set up like a parable between the philosophical approach, and I can define this, and the prophetic approach. And this is talking about particular methods or intentions behind these two worldviews. And for people who've been following discussions for some more time, may have realized that so far almost every of these sections or these chapters is set up like a story between two people, or two worldviews, two ways of looking at the world, attitudes. It's not necessarily two different people, but it's two ways of perception or two methods of perception. So this one in particular is highlighting an approach that is inspired and instructed through revelation, and one that holds source of knowledge and source of knowledge and other attributes of things that we witness in this world within oneself, or within the object themselves, or within the universe itself. The Quran as a symbol of knowledge or information, or becomes a symbol of knowledge and information that is not to be found within this universe. And there was a very, I think, a very nice example in being related to as an antique. So to someone who does not have knowledge about antiques and precious objects and so forth, will probably look at the Quran as, a book with a number of pages, and let's say, look at its exterior and its matter, and not really find anything of value in it. But someone who may have had an eye or an understanding of what it is that constitutes value from a human perspective, and let's say as an antique collector, they know what constitutes value. What period of this time is this object from, what is the material, what is its sort of like style. All of these things contribute to their assessment of the value. And whoever understands those elements, so as a human being, whoever recognizes that their human needs, such as existential questions, satisfactory and sustainable, lasting answers are not to be found for them within, the universe itself, including various other forms of knowledge and ideas. They might encounter the Quran from a different lens, because it represents to them a knowledge or information that was not found anywhere else. So just a construction of the parable there. Then, so while the philosophical approach in this example likened to, let's say, a materialist scientific approach, not necessarily, and we had a good clarifying discussion on that this does not critique scientific method as a field of research and a field where people are coming up with applicable technologies, but it critiques the attitude of a materialist scientist who may have configure ways to derive principles for application purposes, but may not engage the universe to derive universal truths and eternal principles, to understand how one should act or behave to improve their own life, as in their human existence, things that refer back to their created nature. So there's a difference between being smart and clever and the wisdom that is being talked about here. And we talked about this aspect of specialty. So everybody approaches the universe with their specialty, and a chemist will approach the universe with that lens. A computer scientist might approach the world with that lens, et cetera, et cetera. But as a human being, and this constitutes them, a chemist is ultimately a human being, obviously. And no matter what your specific outlook is, at the end of the day, your specialty is your needs as a human being to search for those universal and eternal meanings and principles that inform you of who you are, vis-a-vis the source of those meanings. And there was another point about wisdom is a calls for questioning one's existence and purpose, not taking anything for granted. And the last point I'll say by way of summary is the idea of studying the universe for meaning, as opposed to studying it to derive applications, principles for application. So as individuals, without any, let's say, particular agenda or intent that has to do with our, let's say, material success and gain, our attitude should be a very blank one, in which one is curious and inquisitive in saying, I don't know what my existence is about, who I am, but I will use this universe, engage with it and myself, in the fact, and the Quran as a representative or a, let's say, the universe in language form, to understand these questions and question and engage them from a point of view of, I don't know, and I will find out with an open mind. So hopefully that helps summarize some of the points from last week. I apologize if they were a little incoherent, but you're also welcome to add in the chat box or raise your hand if you think there's something that needs to be re-emphasized or that I missed, or that caught your own attention in your own life in these past few weeks. So you're welcome to do that at any time. This week, we will start from the second principle, and I will start reading and probably stop where I think we might have enough of discussion material. So, second principle, a comparison between the moral training, the wisdom of the all-wise Quran gives to personal life and what philosophy and science teach. The sincere student of philosophy is a pharaoh, but he is a contemptible pharaoh who worships the basest thing for the sake of benefit. He recognizes everything from which he can profit as his Lord, and that irreligious student is obstinate and refractory. But he is wretched together with his obstinacy and accepts endless abasement for the sake of one pleasure. And he is abject together with his recalcitrance or recalcitrance, and shows his abasement by kissing the feet of satanic individuals for the sake of some benefit. And that irreligious student is conceited and domineering, but since he can find no point of support in his heart, he is an utterly impotent, blustering tyrant. And that student is a self-centered seeker of benefit whose aim and endeavor is to gratify his animal appetites, a crafty egotist who seeks his personal interests within certain nationalist interests. All right, stopping here. So there is a lot of, let's say, packed language in the terms of using words like Pharaoh, and terming that something that he does, he redefines as his Lord. There's an attitude being described, and we'll discuss all of this, for the sake of one pleasure. And he is, there's another statement of kissing the feet of satanic individuals, and more sort of attitude, and we can get to it if it doesn't not get repetitive with how it's been described before. Ultimately, this is his, let's say, intent of satisfaction, animal appetites. What are those? He's a crafty egotist who speaks personal interest, and with another interesting thing, nationalist interest. I'm sure this author is commenting on various levels of this manifestation that one can observe if one wants to understand this particular attitude. So starting off, the sincere student of philosophy is a pharaoh. It's curious that, the author will say he's a sincere student still, right? So there's something that he's still doing consistently within this particular worldview of the pharaoh. And we obviously understand that the pharaoh over here is a symbolism. It also instructs us how to perhaps read the symbol of the pharaoh in the Quran as we read in other places. And it's the figure of the pharaoh, or the symbol of the pharaoh is sort of repeated quite often. So in your own understanding, how would you describe this figure that we can call the pharaoh, just as a way of referencing, is doing? He worships the basest thing. So there's an idea that this pharaoh, also this individual, who is a sincere student, still has a method. He still has a worldview, he or she or it, still has a worldview, still has a method, um, and it still has a value attachment. It still recognizes something to be the ultimate in their own construction of their worldview, and that they are somehow committed to it, and dedicated towards it. And it implies that the author is implying that whatever this ultimate or this Lord is for this individual, is something that they have, in a way, conjured or twisted for the sake of benefit. I think we've discussed this in these readings before. Okay, Dr. Ali, you have a hand, so you can probably go ahead.
So please finish your sentence or paragraph, and then inshallah.
Okay. My comment was going to be that we've discussed this in the discussions before about the nature of denial, in different types of discussions, but also one can read it in their own experiences, that just because someone does not, which predicates, or let's say establishes the existence of a free choice or a free will, just because someone denies that, let's say, an apple does not exist on the table, or a table does not exist in the room, does not mean that it's not there, right? So, for example, as an individual, I have the free choice to say that, yes, let's say there's an apple in front of me, or I actually have an equal choice to say that there isn't one. So I guess the first thing to keep in mind is that we do have a choice given to us to confirm or deny whatever it is that it exists for us in our experience. I'm trying not to imply that from the get-go that this person is, even though that's how it's constructed, that there is, that this person is blatantly denying, but I think it's an important thing to keep in mind as we continue to construct this attitude. So that's what I wanted to say first about the existence of a free choice or a free will as a point through which we can understand this attitude or these two particular attitudes. That was my point. Dr. Ali, do you want to go ahead?
Well, thank you. As you said, in this paragraph, a very heavy and accusing language is used. And we say, look, why are you attacking a person? He may have an interest, as you are highlighting now, in his benefit, but though this benefit, as the text says, some base benefit. I mean, look, everybody is benefiting from their work, which is called now technology. What's wrong with it? These people are working hard. But we have to understand that the purpose of being in this world is not really primarily to be concerned or to be used in order to satisfy ourselves, as far as our bodily concern, base concern. Why is it base? I mean, when I eat food, is it a base concern? It means something that I shouldn't do? Or what is wrong with it? The philosophy emphasizes on the nature of this world only as far as its own body, its own being is concerned, not what it really refers to, what it really brings to me, the news about its creator. For example, if someone, as the description or the comparison made in the previous section, in the first principle, then there is a book. This book is very, as you said, antique, and brings a lot of interesting, important information that human beings are concerned with, human qualities are concerned with. But a person takes this book, never gives the possibility that this is a book carrying meaning, teaching me something that I really, as a human being, needed. But looks at the book and talks about how the quality of paper is, how the color of the cover is, and the binding system, talks about all this and appreciates the book, not as a book, but as a collection of paper. I mean, as a human being, would we not really wonder which kind of person he is or human being he is? It is because, as you said, and emphasized on the importance of free will. Free will is given to us to choose between two main fundamental choices. One is the book to be considered and to be benefited from as a paper, a collection of paper, or the book must be treated in a way that I can read and get the information, benefit from the information. My human side needs it. If a person from the beginning chooses that I am nothing but the body only, that is the gravest mistake we can make. Are you body only? You are not a human being, you don't have a human side. No, everything is the result of bodily functioning. It doesn't have any meaning at all. Of course, this person has to treat the whole existence out there in the universe as consisting body, their body only. It means their matter only. Reducing the universe to a collection of matter is the result of one's definition of himself as an animal or animate being, not a human being, an animate being. As they call it, we are the most advanced or evolved chimpanzees. That's what they say, this kind of people. That's why the author is angry, because of their reduction to the reduction of the universe to the level of the matter only, like reducing the value of the book to the level of a collection of paper only. It is an insult to the author. Of course, ultimately, it is an insult to the owner of this universe, because he didn't read the meaning. He didn't mean to read the meaning. That is why the author is angry with this man, because of the insulting attitude towards the universe. Not that he is arguing with or really insulting, assaulting a particular person, the way you emphasized on it. These people are following the way of understanding the reality and the way of understanding their own reality, and also propagating it, saying that we found the truth, we found the reality, look what we have produced so far as a result of our endeavor. You are benefiting from our productions. Of course, if I define myself as an animal or as a matter only, then I would be benefiting from all this for a temporary base pleasure, base benefit, which helps me only for a short period of time. I will benefit from them. It means until I die. But my human qualities will be neglected in an insulting manner. That is why he says this attitude shows his abasement by kissing the feet of satanic individuals. Because if I have this attitude, I will never understand the reality of my existence, and I will only take everything in order to satisfy my own bodily ambitions, bodily expectations, which is the human side says everybody or expects everybody to admire me, not to admire the way I am created. Therefore, admire my creator, how beautifully he made, how perfectly he made me, because I am also a book. The universe also is a book. Therefore, we have to understand that we are carrying the meaning of our creator. So again, if we think about or read the meaning of the universe and existence, I will understand that my creator is introducing himself to me. If someone cuts off my relationship or his or her relationship with its creator, it boils down insulting the creator by denying his ownership of my existence. This is also a big insult. It's a big insult because I am denying my reality. As a consequence of this attitude, I am denying the one who gave me existence, decorated me with all the beautiful qualities, perfections, perfect human qualities he has endowed on me. That is a grave sin, really. So I am expecting people to appreciate me so that they will admire me so that I will feel great. But in fact, what he does needs so appreciation, so much appreciation, but this appreciation must be referred to the creator so that I am manifesting his qualities in my actions. Now, I am saying these are my own work. I made myself so perfectly. Admire me. That's why he says satanic individuals, because Satan represents the denial of the creator. So everybody will appreciate me, applaud me, not my creator who gave me all these qualities that I am using. Thank you.
Jazakallah. I will summarize some of the points and also add thoughts as they were coming when I was listening to Brother Ali. So primarily, the point that was being made was that this Pharaoh type attitude is engaging with their experience in such that the source of meaning, or actually that looking at the universe or objects or their experience or feelings, everything for what they are only on its, let's say, apparent physical material level. And that whatever that they are is just what I see, that there's nothing beyond this. And what that does is that it only focuses one's attention to, one's bodily desires, which are obviously materialist desires, purely as that, instead of thinking about what is it that they refer to, seeing them as signs of their source. Instead of seeing them as signs, they just see them as they are. And which actually brings up an interesting point, which is that if we were to just see things as they are, especially let's say our body or an environment or any aspect of our experience, then we also, it relates to this idea that he's making, the author's making here about the tyrant. And I can see this as, when we think about like tyrannical leaders or like leaders or individuals in power who are, let's say, unfair and unjust, or just, the type of leaders we don't like to see, basically, or be led by. Those individuals are also looking, or seems to be looking at their people as objects, as numbers, whether it could be, some sort of organization or otherwise. And then they use or utilize those people, individual objects, the environment, without thinking of them as conscious beings, and then furthermore as representative of a conscious source. And so which I think relates to the idea of exploitation of people and the environment, when you do not recognize anything conscious about them. And if you do not recognize any conscious side or aspect of your experience, then I don't think they have any feeling of insulting anyone. But as soon as someone connects the idea that no, a letter in itself is nothing, it is always what it means, which is the point of some of letters on a page, and so forth, then I will look towards what it means, what it is saying. Is this for, is this telling me something that I want to hear? Is this beneficial to me in the sense of, is this what I require for my benefit that I did not know about, or that I'm not dictating? The other way that I can see this idea of the tyrant working, one as over people and, let's say, exploiting their people. The other is like you're making, just like a tyrant would subjugate, forcefully manipulate their message to the people in order for them to just re-elect them all the time, or keep them in power. Similarly, a tyrannical attitude towards the universe is also always twisting and forcing things to mean, to behave in the way that you want to, that continues or supports your tyrannical attitude. So it's not what they are perhaps meant to do or they want to do, right? But it's something that you are doing, twisting and forcing to support your position. And thinking about that, this idea, I think we discussed, I summarized it, this idea of like the the philosopher Pharaoh attitude is also a closed attitude, in the sense that you already have decided what is it that you want from it. And you have decided that that gain is also a material or a base, a very superficial gain. And you have already a conclusion before you go and interact. And so and what that does is that once you already have a conclusion, then you are biased to always support that conclusion and support those expectations, because that conclusion or that image or that, conclusion is what you have built yourself to be. And so you're constantly trying to just continue to support it and twist everything towards it, even if those things or that experience is not giving you evidence for it. Whereas the open or the other attitude that looks towards meaning, it's interesting to think that meaning itself is obviously not contained in a physical form. And so by definition, it is abstract, it's endless. And so someone looking towards the meaning will also go in with an attitude of like, I don't know. I will see based on a sincere and honest, and an engagement without a preconceived agenda or conclusion. What is it that I will find? And I will be fair and balanced, let's say, and treat the objects and my life and myself as it is, rather than impose an idea on it beforehand. So I just thought that was interesting, that a closed and a superficial, limited attitude is also closed off in the fact that it only is focused on the apparent, which is a very limited experience, right? In form or in its physical state. Whereas one that is an attitude of what things mean rather than what they appear to be is an open attitude, in which, because meaning in itself is a continuous and presumably endless experience. So I think those were my summary and reflection in a way. Okay. We'll just sort of finish. I think many of the top aspects we discussed, but just in order to close this paragraph off, just going to focus on the last half of this to see. So, but since he can find no point of support in his heart, maybe this is actually a good point to discuss. So we've come to hear this word heart quite a bit in, let's say, the Islamic literature, or even in these readings, that the heart in some way is symbolizing some sort of a compass, let's say, that is not faulty, but it's something that orients someone. It is kind of, as the literal word even suggests, it's the center, it's the most important, or the place where everything converges in a way. But in our, I guess, discussions, the heart comes to represent that side or aspect of the human being that is unbiased, is clean, as in pure, as in unbiased again, that represents or orients someone or in a human being towards seeking the true nature of themselves, and by way of oneself, the universe. It is also something that is unbiased in the sense that it is not informed like by these preconceived conclusions that are represented in the idea of the pharaoh, and I guess are going to be represented in the ego. Something that can presuppose a conclusion and stick with it, as opposed to the heart, which does not take external ideas to bear on it, but rather it has it represents, let's say, a pure unbiased condition. And this individual or this attitude, conceited and domineering, since he can find no support in his heart, he is an utterly impotent, blustering tyrant. So, for example, this is just an example that's just coming to my mind. Let's say there's the weather forecast is really stormy and wintry, and all the warnings are there to not drive and to not get out on the road and stay inside your house, etc., etc. And you really want to go somewhere, I don't know, visit a friend, or you really wanted to go do something. And let's say that something is something to do with your base desire, like you really wanted to go eat something somewhere on the other side of the city. And you were really just craving that and nothing else. You find no evidence, or let's say support, in the conditions and in the conditions of the reality around you to take this decision. If you were to really be, let's say, diligent and let's say, listen to things outside of your craving and desire, you would say, yes, there are all these warnings and they take into account a lot of factors, and they're obviously they have the best intent, like, the weather services have the intent to keep people safe. And so if despite those recognitions, you still want to go ahead, like how it's saying a blustering tyrant. And I think in this analogy, one can relate to the idea that despite all the warnings that someone has, and they're blatant and they're clear, and that that the source of those warnings is a entity that has your safety and your security and your well-being, in its purpose, you still want to go ahead because you want to satisfy your craving. And so there's this idea that even though you know something in your heart or within yourself, or you have indications that tell you something, you still deny them. You still have a choice and you deny them. And that would then be just purely because you want to support a conclusion and a desire that you have held about yourself. And whether you completely ignore it or you twist it to serve that purpose. So that was a thought there. Moving on, and that student is a self-centered seeker of benefit, which I think was also somewhat clear that, if I think about this again, when we're thinking about let's say a materialist engagement or a superficial engagement, or an engagement just with sort of like the outer forms of things, there's an implication that it's self-centered. So let's say, which I think could be sort of trying to unpack a little bit. Let's say someone who is just, I don't know, earning money to get rich for themselves is also doing charity at the same time, right? And someone could argue, well, this person earns some so-and-so from their life, but they also do charity. How is that self-centered? I think it's a valid claim to bring up, and one should ask, like, what is self-centered about it? And the endeavor is to gratify his animal appetites. If I were to think of this, question while I wait for other people to also have thoughts on this idea, like how is, let's say even seemingly helping people with donating money or doing other good acts could also be self-centered. And so the idea will come, I think, to give myself a hint and to give everybody a hint, the concept will come back to the idea that, my decision or to do good because it acknowledges the source of those qualities as being other than myself, or I am doing good that in a way that says, yeah, I made the money and then, I donated it, and the money itself and the help itself all, are just merely, let's say, objects and experiences that that I have in and of themselves, and and the person will be helped because of the money that I gave them. So the causes of all the help and the satisfaction, whether in me or the help to the person, is within the act of the objects and in myself in particular. So in this case, someone could be doing outwardly charitable acts, but also at the same time, they could still be self-centered. If the cause of all those feelings and let's say gratifying feelings is considered to be within the objects themselves. I may have made a shortcut there, but others are welcome to unpack it. Okay, and a crafty egotist who seeks his personal interest with national interest. I personally feel we've done a decent job at going through this particular attitude and different aspects. So there's an emotional side, like let's say traits of this individual. There is a understanding of what the intentions of this individual are. We've also sort of discussed what is it that could be the way to explain this type of attitude, which is some sort of denial of one's conscious nature, and hence the conscious nature of all existence. And that conscious nature is represented in the unbiased and sort of unpolluted aspect of the human being referred to as the heart, that acts as, let's say, a compass or as a as a compass that gives one direction towards their investigation. But you are, or anyone is welcome to either follow it, confirm it, whether that's the direction that really does satisfy them, or deny it in favor of their preconceived ideas, conclusions, and their basis desires or animal appetites. All right. If we don't have additional thoughts on this paragraph, we can move on to read about the other side. However, the sincere student of Quranic wisdom is a servant, but he does not stoop to worship even the greatest of creatures. He is an esteemed slave who does not take a supreme benefit like paradise as the aim of his worship. And its student is humble, he's righteous and mild, yet outside the limits of his maker's leave, he would not voluntarily lower and abase himself before anything other than his maker. I'll just see where, okay, we can finish this paragraph and discuss it together. And he's weak and in want, and he knows his weakness and poverty, but he's self-sufficient due to the wealth which is his all-generous Lord has stored up for him in the hereafter, and he is strong since he relies on his master's infinite power, and he acts and strives only for God's sake, for God's pleasure, and for virtue. Thus, the training the two give may be understood from the comparison of the two students. One thing that immediately caught my attention was that in both the paragraphs, there is a dual, let's say, relationship, or there are two things, right? There's the Pharaoh, and then it's his abasement, or like, I think, base desires or carnal appetite, or himself. So it's the Pharaoh and then himself, or the philosopher Pharaoh himself, and on the other side, his own desires, appetites, etc. In this paragraph, it's the servant, and then it is, the one, I guess, he serves, but more so, I think there's this idea of the maker, the creator, the God, all of these other names. So the dynamic or the relationship changes because of just the way that one defines themselves. Your, let's say, object, your purpose, your existence, your identity, let's say, changes completely in how one defines themselves. So in this case, the Pharaoh is defining them himself in opposition or in relation to his desires or himself. And in this case, this individual is being defined in opposition to its createdness, and hence its maker, which is implied in the fact that something is created. Like we always mention this idea that the evidence of the author is within the existence of the book itself. Should the book be recognized as the fact that it needs an author? I'd be curious if others also sort of see this. I like to call this as the identity statement. So if someone asks someone who they are, and if they define themselves in relation to themselves, as in their desires, their own titles and worldly sort of, references, or material references, then you can probably also understand their worldview, because that's how they identify. Whereas if someone identifies themselves as a created being, then, I like to call it one's identity card or their identity statement. Anywho, the first thing that we obviously, are drawn into is this use of the word servant. And again, it's a heavy word in the sense that, in our own lives, I think in this era, the idea of the servant is considered to be demeaning or abject. They tell you not to call someone that, or it's a humiliating sort of attitude. So is the one of a slave. It implies in our current sort of, I guess, vocabulary, or the way that it is used in this era, no one wants to be a slave to anything. No one wants to be a servant, and you shouldn't even call someone else one. And it seems it's like an unfair and demeaning sort of position to be in. But clearly that's not what the author is implying here, and it in fact is something completely opposite. But and so we perhaps have to then open up these terms such that they don't contain, either when we use them, they don't come with all of this baggage, of humiliation and demeaning, and as if I don't have any, say in who I am, and I just do, and I'm like sad and, in despair because I'm a slave or a servant, or because I don't have my own mind. I think that's a common one, especially in religious contexts. Some sort of like sheep, doesn't think for themselves. But clearly that's not what's being implied here. And the sentence that I think helps us begin to think about this is this: but he does not stoop to worship even the greatest of creatures. So this attitude is let's say, a humble or a servant type attitude, but the author did not use the word servant to describe the Pharaoh's attitude, which is also doing the same thing. It is submitting itself to one's desires, ego, and their view of the world as they see it in themselves, without relation to anything else. So, and so in the first case, the Pharaoh is also worshiping. It is also subservient to its own self, whereas the servant also has the same attitude of being subservient or recognizing something as, let's say, not dictating, but defining itself. But this source of definition is not of the nature of a created being. So even the greatest of creatures, implying that nothing within this universe, nothing of a created nature that was brought into existence, that requires sustenance and has an end and dissipates and dies over time, even if it is the best or highest of it, that is not what the source of definition of this identity is, or the reference for this definition is. So I just want to find the right sort of way to conclude for this week here, and then inshallah picking it up from next week. So maybe finishing up this statement and seeing if we find a good moment of closure. He is an esteemed slave who does not take a supreme benefit like paradise as the aim of his worship. Okay. Again, this whole idea of the servant or the slave is actually being turned into something of the highest honor that one could achieve or have, because this person does not, or this attitude does not take benefit, or is not seeking some sort of pleasure, maybe represented in the paradise, as the aim of his worship. So in a sense, one way to, I guess, look at so the two choices as we divided them were one who considers the book as a collection of paper, as a collection of letters and writings, and the other attitude that looks towards the meaning, which by definition is endless, eternal, and sort of open to discovery and constant exploration and questioning and so forth. And this attitude, I guess, over here to me is implying the more of an emphasis on the second part, which is that it doesn't have an end in mind. So it is looking towards something that represents eternity, that represents, let's say, in form, in other ways of perfection, of absoluteness, because it's not taking anything as an aim or any idea of pleasure or of comfort to be the end in itself. I will probably leave it there, but we'll definitely continue discussing it. But leaving it at the idea of this individual who is looking towards, let's say, the world of meanings, or is the seeker of meaning, is motivated or is drawn by nothing along the way except perhaps the source of the meanings itself. And I think that's where I will end my thought. Is there anything that anyone wanted to add by way of also something we should consider as we begin this, continue this discussion next week? You're welcome to share. Okay, in the chat. Rona writes, I'm reminded of this quote attributed to Rabi al-Basri, "Oh my Lord, if I worship you from fear of hell, burn me in hell, and if I worship you from hope of paradise, exclude me from paradise. But if I worship you for your own sake, do not withhold from me your eternal beauty." Yes, I think that is a good example to share, and something that helps us reflect on this idea of what is it that is my ultimate aim aim. And by way of also defining myself, who am I? Where will I be satisfied for this question to end? And I think it's a sort of question that seems to be open to being questioned continuously. And by way of that, we continue to define ourselves in relation to the source of meaning and source of our own existence as human beings with a consciousness, seeking things that are not limited in any sort of sense of the word. So thank you for sharing that. All right, we'll end with the dua as usual. Subhanaka la ilma lana illa ma 'allamtana innaka antal alimul hakim wa akhiru da'wahum anil hamdulillahi rabbil alamin bi hurmati sirri